Hi, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Jennifer.
And you're watching A Well-Traveled Life.
Where we will do cool projects around the house.
And travel the world.
Here's to the journey.
Our company is called Well-Traveled Life, and we do everything from travel videos to videos about our life and projects back home. And because I also happen to be a musician, I have a recording studio, I have an interest in interviewing musicians. So as we've been traveling around, I've been trying to find folks that I can talk to about music and about their careers and how that pandemic has affected them. Today we're on board the Nieuw Statendam, and we are interviewing Julian Gargiulo.
Well done, Jonathan.
Close. The pianist with the hair.
Pianist with the hair.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Absolutely.
We have really enjoyed your shows, and from the beginning, it was clear to both of us that this was not going to be my father's show in terms of classical music. The music you were playing before the show, the Beatles, you came out, you got your Converse sneakers on, your Beatles t-shirt, and just the way you approach the whole show is very refreshing to us, and I'm guessing that is no accident. Maybe you could talk about that.
Yes, it is true that my presentation is anything but classical, in spite of the fact that the show is predominantly classical music.
Right.
And I was trained very classically. I grew up in Italy, and I went to a classical piano conservatory there, and then I studied in Moscow, and then in the States, and it was always classical. And so I did start my career normally as a
traditional way.
Yeah, like with a tuxedo, come out, play, bow, and leave. But there was a sort of natural progression. I remember I did one show in particular where the presenter asked if I could explain a little bit the music, and since I'm someone who enjoys making people laugh, when I was explaining the music, I guess I must have made a couple of jokes, and the audience laughed, and I think that kind of got me hooked on that idea. And so from there, I guess it was a continuous evolving of that idea, and depending on the audience, it could change how the presentation is. But my general hope is to make classical music more appealing and relevant, and that's kind of the idea behind that.
Well, that's what I think the audience is feeling in your shows. That
it's working then.
It feels very accessible. It feels like you're, without sounding like you're teaching, that you are introducing an audience that some of the people may not know anything about classical music.
Well, one of the nicest things for me to hear after a concert is, oh, my husband hates classical music, and I dragged him here, but he really loved it, or something like that.
Reminds me a little bit of Mozart. So I'm comparing you to Mozart, but I mean, he definitely, if the stories that we read about him are true, I've read his letters. I mean, he was very funny, and he could be profane, I guess, but he definitely had a joy about his music and his performance and playing, and I think he was trying to engage people in the way that you are. So, writing operas in German or using a German libretto. I mean, he was trying to bring common people into music. And
he wanted them to understand it.
In your shows, you talk about your family, but maybe for our people watching this video, you could talk about your family.
Sure. I do talk a lot about everything that's going on in my life in my shows. So they're very personal, and of course my family is a huge part of my life, and so my wife, I talk about where we met, and that we met in, it's a bit of an odd, an Italian and a Greek, we met in Brooklyn, which is where apparently Italians and Greeks go to meet, and then people usually wonder why we live in Paris. We wanted to have a neutral country.
Okay.
But no, the truth is that my wife got accepted into a very prestigious program at the Sorbonne University in Simultaneous Interpretation, which is basically when somebody's giving a conference and there are a bunch of room full of delegates, and say the person is giving the conference in Greek. Well, and many of the delegates are from different countries. They don't speak Greek, so they have these simultaneous interpreters in booths that listen to the Greek. Well, in my wife's case, listen to the Greek, and then at the same time interpret it into English, which is kind of mind-boggling, especially considering that my wife can't even understand one language when it's me speaking. I think that's on purpose, though.
That could be.
But yeah, and then of course we have two kids, and they're, you know, when you have kids, that becomes a huge part of your life, and so they're in my show as well. I feel it's interesting to share with the audience, because it is not typical that a child would grow up with, in our case, 4 languages. Me speaking Italian, my wife speaking Greek, our common language at home being English, and then we live in Paris, so the kids go to the French school. So it's hard to say which is their main language at this point. I think that, oddly enough, for my daughter, because as we all know, kids are watching a lot of screens, and everything that she watches is in English. So she speaks a lot of English. And I guess my wife and I speak in English, so maybe it's natural for her to hear a conversation in English, and then she's not going to start speaking. But if she's just with my wife, she does, speak to her in Greek. So.
Did you come from a musical family?
Not particularly. They were music lovers, and they encouraged us. But in my family in particular, I have an older brother and sister, and they got piano lessons. And then they were like, well, we're not going to waste more money on the youngest one. And so I didn't really get piano lessons, but I loved playing by ear, and I would repeat what my brother and sister would play. And then at a certain point, I got more and more into it, and that's when I auditioned for the music conservatory in Verona, and I got into that.
What kind of music were you listening to?
I don't remember. So I have serious mental lapse from up until the age of like 11 or 12, and then I think at that point I was listening to a lot of classical music. And I didn't have a very typical childhood in that I was very different from the person that you see today when I was growing up. Pretty much until the age of 19, I was very, very shy. Painfully shy. So very different, and a lot of people have trouble believing that I was shy, because now I so much love meeting people and interacting with them. That's kind of the main thing I think that I.
You feel like an extrovert now, but you started out as
as an introvert, and I just was very much with my mom and my sister, and I really only had a few friends, and then it was very much about music when I got into the music conservatory. So after the age of 13, I was just like music and reading and playing chess.
Would you say that is kind of late for someone who wants to be a professional?
Very late.
So you made up for lost time at some point?
I always had the feeling that I had to make up for lost time. So I always had that feeling like I have to do things faster. So for instance, even just the music conservatory in Italy, it's a 10-year program. But I got in when I was 13, so I skipped a bunch of years and I finished in 6 years. But I always had this feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm so behind. I have to, because most people would start when they're like 6. So like all these years to make up for.
So was there a moment, or do you remember where you just thought, I've got this, I can make a career out of this?
Last night.
I thought
during the show.
The last 10 minutes.
The last 10 minutes.
No, was there? I mean, or did you know from the beginning this was going to be?
Well, I would say that I certainly didn't know until. So when I started the conservatory, I was 13. and I met a teacher
Yeah.
that was instrumental.
Yeah.
Forgive the pun. And really changed me, and in particular, it was a piece of music that she was really a character, and probably a lot of the things that she did now would be, considered abusive and not possible.
Okay.
But it was very helpful for me, just in terms of I was someone who didn't do anything very seriously. I was just one of these kind of haphazard people. I would start something and then I'd get excited about something else, and I'd get excited about something else. And instead she kind of focused my energy. But the way she did it was she made me believe that I was special, like that I had a special gift. And I think that your parents probably, they try to make you feel like you're special, but you don't believe it because it's your parents. But it's like that outside validation that becomes, and then I think at 13 you have so much energy, and so I was just pouring all this energy into music, and she was working with me every day. Like she would sit with me for 3-4 hours in her studio for free. So that also was like, why would this person be doing that? And so I progressed very, very quickly in a very short amount of time. And then I, like a couple of months later, I won a competition in Italy. And so I think it all kind of, and then I was just, I was very convinced already, like at 14, that I was going to be a pianist. Like that was, I knew I wanted to be a pianist. Whereas, for instance, my brother and my sister, who were older, and even when they were in college, they didn't really know what they wanted to do.
Okay. They weren't studying music.
They weren't studying music for sure. No. My sister's a best-selling author, and my brother is he's a banker and very smart. He went to Yale, and but very very competitive, and I was kind of not that way. But it's funny how in life it's a tremendous gift to know what you want to do. Such a, you're like so far ahead of everybody else. Because I think in general life is a little bit about figuring out what you want to do. But then when you already are like, I want to do that, then you can just focus on that. So much easier.
So at 19 or 20, sometime in there, you finished your studies at the...
So I finished the conservatory when I was 19, I guess. I finished when I was 19. And then that's when I went to Russia to study in Moscow, at the conservatory in Moscow. Initially it was for a summer program, and then I decided, I auditioned and I got in, and so I stayed the year. And that's when I became the way I am now. But it had to do with leaving home. So in a way it's like in the States you go to college, and you have the college experience of freedom and life. So that was my college experience.
So when
and of course it was in Russian, and nobody spoke English or Italian, and it was living on my own suddenly, and fending for myself.
So, but when you say you became what you are, I mean, do you mean in terms of
hair?
Becoming hair? Yes. No, more extroverted, more of maybe this idea of what you were going to be doing now in terms of the kind of performances you would be doing, or much earlier? No, not that at all. I think what I mean is, actually I made the joke hair, but it is true that when I went to Russia, I finally stopped cutting my hair, and it did become like this, and I was like, oh, that's not so bad. Maybe I'll keep it. But I meant in terms of being an extrovert. Because suddenly I felt, how when you're in a city where everybody knows how you are, it's very difficult to be somebody else, because they're like, oh no, he's the guy who doesn't talk. Then I went to another city where they didn't know who I was, so it's like, I liked to be funny, I guess, in my head, and so I started being funny outside of my head. People were laughing, and I was like, oh, I like this much more. And everybody was like, oh, he's the guy who's always making jokes. So it was much easier. Okay, good. So what, in terms of musical jobs, and what did you do the first 10 years or so? Were you just doing individual shows, competitions?
Well, as a classical musician,
Yeah.
there's so many classical pianists.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
every year
Yeah.
a million more graduating,
Right.
and very good.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, initially it was obviously a big challenge.
Yeah.
And I did some competitions, and some went well and some didn't go well, but
Yeah.
it's a very competitive thing.
Dog,
And-
exactly.
yeah, and I mean, I didn't even come from a musical family, so it's not like I had any connections and that somebody could pick up the phone and say, oh, go here and do that. I had very supportive parents,
Yeah.
but they didn't know how to,
Let me call my
yeah,
friend.
yeah, they didn't know how to help me.
Yeah.
But I think I was lucky. I moved to New York, and I ended up doing a tour with a trumpet player
Okay.
who was a big influence on me as well, because we were spending a lot of time together, and he was someone who had done a lot of touring.
Okay.
And we would then do these shows together. I was predominantly accompanying his show,
Okay.
but he was a very cool guy, because he also said, well, I would like you to be featured in every concert for a segment.
Yeah.
And so I would see him do the performance, and I think I got a lot of experience, and those long hours on the road when I would just keep asking him questions. So how do you do that? How do you meet, what it
Were
was.
you developing this personality that you are on stage now?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course it was difficult at the beginning, because there were just there weren't many opportunities. And I think the Beatles would teach us that performing together over and over and over and over again is what enables you to do what you then are able to do.
Yeah.
So it's one of these catch-22 things, especially at the beginning when you're just a student and you just finish. You only have maybe one concert, 2, 3 concerts in a year.
Yeah.
How can you be good?
Yeah.
You have no practice doing it.
Yeah. Every
So,
time's like a new time.
Every time is like a new time. So you need to be able to do it enough to become good at doing it, but they're not going to let you do it enough to become good at doing it, because you're not good at it. It's like one of those catch-22 situations.
Yeah.
It's like in France.
Yeah.
In France, to open a bank account, you need an address, but to rent an apartment, you need a bank account. It's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
how do I do that?
Exactly.
So it was tricky. I think as anything else, it's a lot of perseverance. So it's difficult, but you keep doing it. If you want it, if you're convinced that that's what you want to do, you just keep doing it. I mean, I have so many friends that were with me in conservatories, and they're doing something else now.
Has most of your work been as a solo artist, occasionally touring with somebody, or have you ever played as part of an orchestra or some kind of ensemble or quartet or something like that? Or?
I never did, and again, this goes back to having supportive parents, because there were times when it was very difficult to support myself.
Sure.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I never was part of an ensemble, but I did teach at the beginning.
Okay.
And then as I got more performances, it became difficult to teach, because kids need a regular person, and if every other week you're like, well, I have to cancel this lesson, it's not good for them, even if you're a good teacher. And I did enjoy teaching, especially the students that were into it.
Right.
And it's something that I still do in kind of like a master class kind of way. Like I'll be doing some concerts, and then I'll do a workshop at a university or at a high school, and that's a lot of fun.
Right.
But I think in a way, it's also more fun to kind of go in and guest star for a day, as opposed to have to work with someone week after week after week.
Right. How did you make this connection to Holland, America?
So I was doing a concert in New York at the United Nations,
Okay.
and someone there was an agent in the audience, and she came up to me and said, what you do, because I was already kind of doing a bit of a show during my concert, and she said, what you do would work really well on cruise ships. Would you ever consider doing that?
Yeah.
So basically, because people ask me, how do you end up doing a concert on a cruise ship?
Yeah.
So you need an agent that works with the cruise companies.
Okay.
So you sign with an agent, and then they have all the connections with the people that book for the soloists, that the headliners they call them, that come and do like 1 or 2 shows in a week.
Yeah.
And it's it's quite especially when you consider the other people that work on ships that maybe have a contract for 6 months or 9 months, and you come on and you're 1 week and you work 2 nights, and then the rest of the time it's quite nice.
I want to ask you about the last couple of years, COVID, and the world kind of shut down. I imagine it was no different for you. How did you survive? How did you get by? What were you doing during that period of time?
So we were in Paris, and that's where we did.
Worst places to be, I guess.
Yeah, and you saw
Yes.
we're very lucky. We have a very beautiful apartment in Paris. I mean, it's not a huge apartment, but it's a very open view, and it's a very kind of nice place. And we were particularly lucky in that the neighbor who lives above us, who has the same apartment but also has a balcony, she was in Switzerland, and we had the key to her apartment, and she said, use it as if it's your home. So essentially we had both apartments, and she also had a piano. So my wife would go upstairs to use it as a gym, or we would teach our kids up there. It was a tremendous gift. So, and then in terms of earning a living, many people were lucky that they would be able to work from home. But the whole formula of what I do is getting a lot of people into a confined space. Obviously there were no performances going on, and what my wife does, there were no conferences going on. So neither of us had any work. So we did create a few opportunities for ourselves. So I did a fair number of performances on Zoom, and I had come up with a formula where I would have, let's say, 3 or 4 devices, which is very easy on Zoom because you just create 3 or 4 accounts, and each like iPad or iPhone. And so I would have one that would show you my hands on the keyboard. One would show you my face. One would show you from far away. One would show you from the view from our window. But it was interesting because then I had like this basically this package where you could have a concert, and you could, as the person was watching it, they could choose what they wanted to see. It was as if they were editing their own view of your performance. And this is totally doable on, like, you can still do it today. Of course, the sound quality is not spectacular, but my show, as opposed to like another classical musician that is just going to play, it worked also quite well in terms of like I would talk to the audience. I would and I would be very talk right to the camera, and I know everybody's out there, and this is Paris, and this is what we're doing. So it's kind of, I got great feedback from those concerts, and of course it really cut down on the travel time.
Your 1 minute classical.
And that was the other thing. So we had this idea to do something called 1 classical minute, and the idea was each episode would be on a different composer, and my wife and I did it together, and she would do a lot of the filming, and we'd come up with the ideas together and write them and then film them, and we've done 11 of them, and lots of fun, and good feedback on that too.
Julian, thanks again for talking with us today, and let me just give you a chance maybe to close with anything you want to tell our viewers.
But what you mainly need to take away from this is subscribe to welltraveledlife.com. Subscribe now. This is where you are going to get the best interviews ever.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Jonathan.